orientation, and it's all about building the right team for us. Um, the best organizations that create the greatest impacts on youth have one common denominator, and that's the onboarding process. And it sets everyone up for success to be able to fulfill their role for that organization. We're going to walk through that onboarding process today and talk about some of the strategies to ensure it's an effective process and tools that keep things consistent. Um, Throughout this, I'll definitely be mentioning some of the pieces of Tiffany's presentation because there's going to be some overlap in there, but the way the Boys and Girls Club and the way the YMCA do things is slightly different. There are a couple of different perspectives here, but we also want to hear from you throughout the day. I know that there are practices that are happening in all your organizations that we can all learn from. So there are going to be some opportunities for some feedback, but at the end, there's going to be a brief question and comment section. And please, anything that resonates with you or anything that your organization is doing really well, we want to hear about it because that's important. And in spaces like this, we all need to be able to learn from each other. With that being said, if you have any questions throughout, please just drop them in the chat. I'm going to try to take as many breaks as possible and address as many of those questions as possible. But in my mind, a lot of this is really straightforward. We've all done this before. We've all been here. We've all hired. And I think the reality is that we've all made mistakes. And so hopefully we can all learn together and make as few mistakes as possible and prepare our young people by providing them with the best staff. So let's dive in. So we're looking at overview, we're looking at job posting, we're looking at candidate identification, the interview process, onboarding, and a continued success plan. Most organizations view onboarding as something that happens once the candidate accepts the role. But the reality is that onboarding starts the minute they see a job posting. That's when a candidate starts to build their impression of your organization. That's when they start to create this vision for themselves of what working at your organization looks like. And so for us at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kalamazoo, it's important that we view that as part of the onboarding process and selecting candidates, interviewing candidates. That's all onboarding. So we'll go ahead and dive right into that and we'll work through it. So the logic here is pretty simple. We want to make it effective. We want to make it timely. We want to make it efficient. And we need to meet the staffing requirements of the organization. It should be consistent between positions within the organization and followed with fidelity to ensure employee qualification, preparedness for the position, and fair hiring practices. The onboarding process has 4 components: posting, candidate identification, interview process, and staff training. We'll dive into each one of these things and be able to go a little bit deeper in there. So job posting, what to post. Accurate and clear responsibilities are essential. Every potential candidate should be able to paint an accurate position or picture of what the position entails. If candidates can't picture the job, they can't picture themselves doing the job. I'm sure we've all seen job postings over time where we read the job posting and immediately our first reaction is, well, I could do that and this is how I do that. And that's what we want candidates to be able to derive when they see those things. We want them to be able to picture that, and that happens through accurate and clear responsibilities. We want it to be easily understandable. Our world is filled with acronyms. I think that all of us can just take a quick second and think about all of the different acronyms, all the phrases for OST within our organization. The reality is that if you don't work in our organizations, you might not understand those. So you need to make sure that when you're posting very specific things like SEL or PQA, that you're making sure that you're expounding on those a little bit, at the very least, explaining the acronym. And if we need to talk about SEL, that might not be common knowledge for everyone. And so making sure that we're taking a step back and saying, okay, what is social emotional learning? So we're building that frame of reference. Employee benefits are critical. What benefits do you offer that would entice a candidate? Do you provide PTO to part-time staff? Do you have a wellness program? Do you have flexible hours for college students? Not only should organizations have some sort of employee benefits beyond a paycheck, you got to market those. Those are what's going to grab those fringe candidates that may or may not apply. They might be qualified, they might not. But sometimes employee benefits are the thing that really tips them over the edge. And I think it's worth asking your current staff what they see as benefits of working for the organization. There might be meaningful benefits that you don't even realize, but your staff, it keeps them coming back every day. It helps retain them. And so something to make sure you're just considering when you're building those job postings. Organization impact. I can confidently say that everybody on this call right now is doing great work and making an impact. I see so many job postings that don't talk about that. We do this work for a reason. And the candidates that you're going to hire, they're probably not doing it for the paycheck. I can pretty confidently say that none of us took our first roles within the youth development sector for the paycheck. So why did we take it? We took it because of the work that we're able to do. And I think it's important to talk about that. Talk about the difference we make, talk about the impacts, talk about the outcomes. Use data if you have it available. I think it's important for people to understand what you're driving towards and what they're going to get involved in. And then balance of qualifications. I think every organization assesses candidates on a wide array of qualification, but it's important that we don't overstress any qualifications specifically. I think that might intimidate potential candidates. Our goal is to cast as wide of a net as possible and recruit as many qualified candidates as possible. And we all value things differently, right? We all weigh all of the different qualifications a little bit differently. But if you have too high of a focus on education, someone without too much formal education might not apply, and they might be the perfect staff for your program. So making sure there's a balance in there. But with that balance, it's also really important to be transparent about mandatory qualifications for grant and licensing purposes. I know Tiffany is going to mention a little bit more on that because their organization does require a child care license. But those are just things that you want to make sure are clear up front, so you don't end up going through this entire process, bringing someone in for an interview and realizing that they don't even actually have the qualifications that are required for the position. So not only does it matter what you post, it matters where you post, how you reach people. I think the most essential piece is understanding who your target audience is. Who are you looking to reach? If you're looking for folks with some sort of formal education, use local college and use university employment tools. If you're looking for somebody with a professional experience, use LinkedIn. Sites like Indeed are great, but oftentimes they're oversaturated and can reach too broad of an audience. If any of you use Indeed, you know that you're going to get a ton of applications for any job you post. It'll be someone from Alaska that's just applying to every single job that shows up on Indeed for them. And so it just casts a really wide net, and it's going to take you a little bit more time. But there are also pros to using that, because I think we've all probably found some effective and really qualified staff using that tool as well, but it's just understanding how to balance it. Accessibility. How can you make sure you diversify your recruitment to reach as many qualified candidates as possible? Using just one tool, using just Indeed, using just a college website, those aren't going to be enough. You want to figure out how you can reach everyone, and oftentimes there can be barriers that make those traditional job posting techniques inaccessible, or we're just not going to reach the right people, right? So reaching individuals where they're at it's essential to it. And that leads right into utilizing local talent. One of the most important things for me when hiring is representation. Representation matters. If you take nothing else out of today, please take out that representation matters. The staff that you have within your organization should reflect the youth that you're serving. Again, if you're going to take anything out of this, take away that representation matters. So finding ways to connect with individuals that live in the neighborhood you serve is often a really overlooked step. Physical job postings, we don't see them around very often anymore, but they're effective. If you know that there are large gatherings of people in your community where adults might see this job posting, figure out how you can get that posting there. Or could you do a hiring event at that place? It's essential to reach the people that live in the community that you serve, because they're going to have a perspective and a lens and life experience that's going to be far more meaningful to the youth of your program than someone that doesn't have those things. Also, alumni. Finding alumni of your program is they know what the program looks like. They know what it feels like, and they understand what it means to be a youth in that program. And so the more that you can bring alumni back that understand those neighborhood nuances, the better your organization is going to be. The last piece is a job sharing component. What other youth serving entities are in your community that you might be able to serve with. So for example, in Parks and Rec in Kalamazoo, they have a morning program in the summer, and we don't start until the afternoon. And so we've had the opportunity to find staff that are looking for more hours on their end and on our end, and they'll go and work for Parks and Rec in the morning, and then they'll come to the Boys and Girls Club right afterwards in the afternoon. It's getting more and more difficult to recruit staff at this point. We all understand that you can go to McDonald's and probably make more money out of the gates than you could at most of our organizations. That's just the reality. So how do we lean into the creativity that's required to get people into our doors to do the work that we so desperately need them to do? So my question is, what does it mean to be a part of your team? Does it mean to be you're hardworking? Does it mean you're passionate? Does it mean that you have experience? So I want everybody to take a second about how you define what it means to be a part of your team. And in a couple of words, please drop that in the chat. Because again, we need to learn from each other. So think about, what does it mean to be a part of your team? Engaged. I love that one. We're in it together. Yep. Sharing responsibility. Being adaptive, being fully present, trust, sharing responsibility, communication, helping each other out. Supporting the vision and sustaining it with helping hands. Yes. I think all of these things are so important. Celebrating wins. Yes. We forget to do that so often with our staff. We don't forget to do it. We don't forget to do it with our kids, but we forget to do it with our staff. And everyone needs that sort of recognition. I love that. Um, these all sound like teams that I want to be a part of. And how do you build that in? Connecting to a statewide network. Yes. Thank you, Sonia, for bringing us all together today. Supporting each other and helping each other out whenever possible. Yeah, so these are things that you want to show up in your job descriptions. This is what it means. Many in body, one in mind. Yes. Make sure that you're adding these things to your posts. This tells me more about your organization and more about what you expect. And if I'm reading your job description, I'm understanding how you expect me to show up. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for that. So now we are going to get into candidate identification, I think. There we go. So if you're creating a quality job posting and it has intentional and significant reach, your organization should have an overabundance of candidates. Having a clear understanding of the qualities you're looking for in a candidate makes filtering through those applications and resumes efficient and consistent. The 5 buckets I recommend considering are formal education, professional experience, life experience, representation, and skill set. And I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it 3 more times before this presentation's over. Representation matters. How you look at each of these things and how you weigh each of these things out, those are really specific to organizations. And I think that's okay. But I think all of these things are incredibly valuable. I want you to take a quick second and just think about how candidates and how staff that you've worked with, how formal education has driven their success, how professional experience is driven from success, how their life experience is driven their success, how their representation has driven their success, and how their skill set has driven to success. Because all of those pieces make up every candidate. And how we weigh them, I'm sure we've had candidates that might not have had the education, that might not have had the experience professionally, but their life experience prepared them for this role. And they know how to navigate circumstances. They know how to overcome obstacles. They know how to communicate with folks, right? And so you never want to put too much on any one category, but these are the 5 that I recommend you using and figuring out what your balance is. It won't be 20% across the board for each 5 of them, but I would definitely recommend not having any of them less than 10%. So what qualification bucket do you value most and why? And again, please drop those in the chat so we can learn from one another. Again, those buckets are professional experience, formal education, life experience. Hold on one second. Let me go back. Representation and skill set. So what qualification bucket do you value most and why? And you can speak from you, and not even necessarily from your organization, because I think we all have good personal feelings about this too. Okay, experience. What type of experience? Professional or lived experience? I'll leave this up. Both. Okay, I agree. Skill set.
Practical
Okay.
experience?
Okay, fantastic. Now tell me a little bit more why. Why do you value these things? Why do you value life experience? Why do you value skill set? What about that do you value when you see that application? You think, yes, this person absolutely needs an interview.
Maybe it leads you to the correct way on how to do it. And sometimes you put a certain plan and you figure out that it's not working.
Yes.
So you change the plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of professional and life experience, a lot of skill sets in there. And I think those are so important. I will say I'm surprised that I haven't seen an education yet. And I think that's interesting to me because I think that's a really big paradigm shift from maybe about 10 years ago, when education was really highly valued, really within this space, and not that it doesn't have it. But you know what? I think this is the perfect one. I think both of these comments, you can have the education, but that doesn't really mean you are good at what you do. Yes, any of us can sit in the classroom. Yeah, you can only learn so much from a book and classroom. Life experience shows what really is happening, and that is when the real learning begins. Exactly. Book smart versus street smart. Yes. I think we've always looked at the education as such an important piece of it, and oftentimes it is, right? There's so much to gain from formal education, but also being able to do it and having that lived experience, that professional experience is real. Thank you. I appreciate that conversation. So we're going to get into the interview process now. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. So since we've posted the positions, we identified the candidates, time to get the right folks in our organization. We've all had great candidates, or we've all hired great candidates that had great resumes, great interviews, and they just didn't end up being a good fit for the organization or the position. It's a waste of resources, and if your organization is anything like mine, you just don't have the ability to waste time and energy. An effective interview process and an effective onboarding process should help you maximize the efficiency when it comes to time and energy. A well-formatted interview process helps maximize your chances of finding the right person, and reduces the time of wasting that. So the three questions that I always want to ask is, how many interviews do you need to see if they have what it takes? Will you be able to tell in just one interview? Do you need multiple interviews in multiple formats? And so in those multiple formats, that's what I'm going to call the interview medium. And so what environment will allow you to understand their skill and potential? Can you gauge it from a phone interview, an in-person interview, a working interview? And when hiring, it's important that we have the ability to not only assess skill set, but potential. You should be hiring on potential and coaching the skill set. There are a lot of folks, especially our frontline folks, that come into our organization that might not have those skill sets. But you know, when you're sitting across the table from them, that you know what, you can do this job and you're going to excel. You're just going to have to learn a couple of things. So it's always important to hire on potential and focus on the coaching of the skill set. We can think of that staff. I think all of you can probably sit there right now and think of that staff that came to you that might have been a little rough around the edges, or they just had that raw skill. But then think about what you poured into them and how the organization invested into them, and think about where they're at today. So make sure that while you're thinking about medium, you're thinking about how you're able to extract that potential And is that, again, is that over the phone? Is it in person? Is it through a skills assessment? Is it through an on-the-job interview? So make sure you're taking medium into account. And then capacity. How much can your organization invest into this process? We'd all like to have a comprehensive process that answers every question about the candidate and gives us a very, very, very clear picture of how they perform. But do we have the resources to do so? Do we have the time? Do we have the energy? Do we have the dollars? Do we have the team of people that can do that? A lot of times I've seen in a lot of different organizations, maybe it's just one person that's doing the hiring, but that person's also responsible for 45 other things in the organization. Or it's you're hiring for your team and everyone has different levels of experience with the onboarding process and with the interview process. So you have to understand what your capacity is and create a process that matches your structure and medium with your resources. Finding the right candidate is an investment, and the more you invest, the better the results. I can't say that enough. If you take this process lightly, you're going to do it more often. Do it right. Take the time with it, and make sure that you have a very clear understanding of what resources you can allocate to it, so you can do it in the best possible way. So again, we're hiring potential, we're coaching skill. So what does potential look like? What does that look like when you interview someone? Is it someone that has a positive attitude, someone that adapts to their surrounding, someone that's overcome personal adversity in their life? So I want to know what that looks like. What does potential look like to you? Drop it in the chat so we can learn something from each other. Confidence. I love that. And then the question is how can you see confidence in the interview? Right? Not everybody's comfortable in an interview setting. So how do we pull that out? Time management, energy, yes, especially working with young people, they have to be able to have the energy to do it. Not everybody's cut for it. That's the reality. Ready to solve problems, coaching and willing to learn. Another confidence, commitment to learn new things. Yes, I think we all come in with a pre-identified notion of what it means and how to work with young people, and we are often so wrong about that. And it's all based on how we were raised and the environments that we were around. And sometimes that's not the best way. I can say that. Common courtesy, morals, manners, respectable, approachable, kind, good communication skills, openness to learn more than they already know. And I think that's, again, how do you in that interview extract if they're ready to learn, if they have that common courtesy, if they're respectable, if they're ready to solve problems. If ready to solve problems shows potential to you, then okay, how do we ask that question in an interview? How do we allow them the opportunity to demonstrate that in the interview? Because that's going to go a really, really long way. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move right on to the training plan. And this is where I assume that most of you thought that we were going to start today. So this is where we're going at this point. So the training plan for me is 4 pieces to it: an onboarding checklist, a staff training, a success plan, and observing and coaching. So an onboarding checklist is critical to ensure consistency, quality, and effectiveness during the onboarding process. Doesn't have to stop after orientation either. I recommend extending it to ensure that the full onboarding process and initial coaching is homogeneous and all new hires have the same experience. Also gives them a very clear line of sight of what the next couple of days, weeks, months can look like. To be clear, this checklist that we're going to go through is one that is meant for the new hire. This isn't meant for the organization. We want the new hire to have this and have ownership over this checklist. And we want them to be able to say, look, I haven't gotten my badge yet. And you had put on my new hire orientation that I would be getting my badge in week 1. We want that relationship to start right there, us being able to hold the candidate accountable and them being able to hold us accountable. Tiffany is going to show you an example in her presentation of an organizational onboarding checklist. And these two tools can balance each other really well. So you know that your managers or the folks that are doing this work are holding up their end of the bargain. And then being able to use an onboarding checklist like this for the candidate to be able to reflect on that a little bit more. It's going to look different for every organization, but the basics that I suggest everyone having on there, new hire paperwork, including tax documentation and background checks, staff materials, shirts, badges, clipboards, whatever they're going to need to be successful when they step on the floor. Tech, when that's solidified, if they get an email, if they need a computer or a tablet to do their job, making sure that's all built in. And then we get into staff training, which we want them to be able to check off the self-assessment, goal plan, observations and coaching, a goal check-in, and a self-assessment. We'll go more into detail about those last few pieces on the next slide. But again, I think it's very important for the new hire to start tracking their journey by themselves. If you've ever worked in a for-profit company, especially a large one, and sometimes it feels like it's just kind of churn and burn, and you just keep getting pointed in all the directions, and you just go through it. I worked at Meijer once upon a time in the produce section, and that 2-day onboarding, the entire time, I had no idea what the process was. It was go to this room, watch this video, come sit down, sign these papers, and by the time it was all over, I was so concerned about what was happening next that I don't think I actually retained anything. So make sure that when you're doing these, we take a second and pause and people understand what the routine is, what the plan is, and allow them that predictability so they can focus on what's right in front of them. So we get into staff training now. Staff training to me is 5 components. It's organization information, org culture, position specifics, positive youth development, and a readiness self-assessment. So org information is going to be your basics. It's your organization history, mission, values, staffing model, participant information, policies, and other pertinent organization details. These are the things that no matter who comes into the organization, at whatever position it is, we know they're going to want them to have this piece in there. Organization culture. I really don't like to use the term culture. I feel like it's misrepresented for image purposes a lot of times, and it's, in a lot of corporations, they talk about their culture, but it doesn't actually reflect what it's like and what it feels like. But in this instance, I'm going to use it because it's imperative for new hires to have a clear understanding of how the organization expects them to show up and navigate as a team member. That's what culture should look like for organizations. How do you show up? How do you operate while I'm in this position in this organization? And we want them to understand that before they even go into it. If we're looking at energy as one of those things that we look for, then we talk about culture. They need to know that you expect them to just be on 10 every single day, unapologetically, that's what you expect. And when they walk into the organization, they can look around and see a ton of other people on 10 having fun the entire time, and that's what it feels like. And you should be able to feel that culture when you walk into your spaces. And so it's not only do you have to talk about it here, but you also have to be about it. And so if you walk into your club and you can't feel that energy, you walk into your organization and you can't feel that energy, then energy shouldn't be a part of your organizational culture. And I think it's something to make sure these things align, but it's imperative that staff know how they need to show up and how you fit into your culture. The position specifics. So this is where it'll get a little bit more diverse depending on what position you're hiring for. But what exactly is their role? What are their expectations and responsibilities? What does success look like in this position? A new hire should be able to understand their role and how they can impact youth if their role is done well. Standard organization procedures should be explained in model. And again, the position specifics is all about how do you see yourself being successful in this position, and what do you need to teach them to prepare them for that? Next piece is positive youth development. So many staff, especially frontline staff, come with that raw talent, right? They might not know what the PQA is. They might not know some of the other million acronyms that we use when it comes to youth development. But they have that raw talent. They have the natural skills and abilities that's going to help them fulfill that role. But we need to connect those skills with positive youth development. You know this individual is a great uncle, a great aunt, a great older sibling. They've babysat. They've done the things. They know how to interact with young people in a meaningful way. But do they know how to necessarily do it the way that we're taught, the way with our standards, the way our organization operates? So we need to be able to connect those skills. And even if they come with youth development experience, every organization has nuances that require additional attention. So some of the youth development standards that I see as common practice are National After School Association core competencies, CASEL SEL, and program standards around quality, such as Weichert youth work methods. And those are all just examples of different positive youth development strategies that can be used. And I'm sure there are folks on this call that use different standards of what is quality, positive youth development for your organization. But make sure you include that, and make sure you have some sort of standard that you're using, and make sure they walk away fully understanding what that standard is so they can reach that standard. The last thing is a readiness self-assessment. So too often we take a cookie cutter approach, like my experience at Meyer, when coaching a new hire right out of the gates. And utilizing a self-assessment for staff at the end of training has a multitude of benefits and creates more individualized approaches to training and development. This will help the organization how they can utilize the candidate most effectively, but more importantly, identify each new hire's strengths and weaknesses. This will help leadership prioritize coaching focuses for each individual. The self-assessment should contain all aspects of positive youth development, program quality, and any skills that the position requires. And I'll share an example at the end of the presentation of one of the readiness tools that I just created for an organization that really ties these things together. But so once we have this readiness self-assessment plan done, now we can do our success plan. So the success plan, a lot of us see them in evaluation forms, and a lot of times it starts after your first year, but we like to build it into the onboarding process. So once the new team member has completed all aspects of training, it's time to develop that plan. The plan is going to do a few things for you. It's going to demonstrate the organization's long-term buy-in to the candidate. So many of us started in positions and in a place where you might have gotten onboarded with multiple people and you just jump right into it and you're just another staff member there. Having something like this is meaningful. It demonstrates your buy-in to that individual that now that you're a part of this team, we're going to help you work to get better at what you do. We're going to help you hone your craft, because if you wanted to do this, we want you to be able to do something more with this, and we want to help prepare you for that. It provides intentionality to their professional development that fits organization needs, and it gives supervisors direction on focus areas. Oftentimes, the folks that are doing the onboarding trainings aren't necessarily the ones that are going to be supervising or managing these folks on the day-to-day basis. So making sure that you're giving them a clear line of sight and the handoff is warm and they know exactly where their focuses need to be. So when creating the goals, so the goals should be based on the readiness self-assessment. We shouldn't be just making up goals out of thin air. They just gave us a self-assessment that tells us what they're good at, where their strengths are, and where they maybe might need some improvement. So make sure that you're tying that self-assessment into these goals. The short, mid, and long-term goals should build on one another as well. If we're talking about an SEL skill, they need to learn how to integrate SEL skills into their activities. For example, maybe the short-term goal is just in the first month, you need to have a clear understanding of all SEL skills and be able to define them. The midterm goal is integrate an SEL skill into one activity per day, pre-planned. The long-term goal is utilize all SEL skills at least once throughout the day, right? And those are things that we're able to observe and we're able to coach. And so, as I mentioned, positive youth development and that training plan, use these competencies, use whatever competencies that you have. Use these standards because that's important. The organizations that are the most challenged when it comes to training and development are ones that don't have some sort of linear standard to help people grow and develop. And again, these are just examples. I'm sure MASP has a ton of other ones that you're able to identify which is right for your organization. But make sure you're using one of those tools. And now the most important part: observe and coach. Um, the onboarding piece is not done yet. They went through your new hire orientation, they went through your training. It's not done. It should be looked at as your onboarding process is from the minute that you see that post or they see that post to their first year evaluation. Um, they are still onboarding. They say it takes 6 to 9 months to be acclimated to a new position in any job, and that's no different here. And so, making sure that you're setting people up for success, they're fulfilling their role to the highest extent. That starts and ends with meaningful observation and coaching. When you're observing, make sure it's scheduled, make sure it's objective. You're taking all the notes, but you're writing down objective components. Susie showed up at 3:45. Susie had all materials planned for the day. That's objective, not Susie had a bad attitude when she came in today. That's subjective, not objective, and that's what we're looking for here. They need to be specific to the goals. If we want folks to grow in the areas of their goals, we have to be intentional. We have to observe those pieces. And also having it done by multiple individuals. The best success that I've had with observations is when I've had a supervisor, a peer, and a young person that's in the program do those observations, right? And it also builds that network, provides much different feedback. I know as a supervisor, I look for certain things, even certain things specific to those goals, but maybe their peers has that different perspective. And I think it's critical to get that full 360 view. And when you bring youth into this process, you'll be incredibly surprised the feedback that you get and what the youth are noticing that you have no idea. So make sure you involve more people. And then coaching needs to be scheduled and it needs to be regular. This doesn't need to be something that happens once every 4 months and you think it's going to be effective. Effective coaching happens multiple times per month. Maybe it's only twice a month, maybe it's once a week, but you need to understand your capacity and how to do this, because you can't expect folks to get better if you're not coaching them. You need to do it quickly as well. It needs to be timely. If you're coaching after you observe, it shouldn't be more than 48 hours or so afterwards when you're having the conversation with them about your observations. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be them to be able to draw back that connection. It needs to be direct and concise. You don't need to sugarcoat it. You don't need to do that. Showing you care for someone is pushing them to be the best version of themselves. Be direct. It's okay. And if that's not something that your organization is great at right now, that's okay. But you need to build to that, because that's what love is. Love is me pushing you to be the best version of yourself. And I need to be direct and concise to do that. You don't need me to sugarcoat it. Now it needs to come with a little bit of kindness and some empathy, right? We need to be able to be aware of how we're approaching it, but that doesn't mean that we need to beat around the bush, if you will. We need to listen for barriers. We also make a lot of assumptions, making sure that we understand if they're having any barriers to doing it. And a barrier is much different than an excuse. Excuses are because someone doesn't want to do it. A barrier is because somebody can't do it. So understand, are there barriers there that are preventing them to do the thing that they need to be doing? And how can you overcome that? What accommodations do you need to make? What preparedness do you need to make? All of these things are going to come out through this process. Provide techniques and strategies. Again, we hire a lot of folks in our sector that haven't worked in the out of school time before. Let's make sure we give them that toolkit to make sure that they're successful. Model. I love the I do, we do, you do approach. However it works for you. When you see it, it makes more sense. There are a lot of people that are visual learners out there. You need to see it in action. And so we need to meet learning style in that way as well, and something to just be conscious of, that everyone learns differently. And so making sure that they got all of it on paper during training and during orientation, but some of them might need that extra modeling session to see it in action. And then celebrate the growth and successes. If you have quarterly all staff meetings, bring up people achieving their goals. It's important to do that. Celebrate them, make them feel valued, make their efforts feel worth it, because we know that by them reaching these goals, we know the impact that that has on our young people. And that's why we do this work every single day. If we're working on trying to help support the next generation to be the leaders in our community. And everything that our staff do every single day is doing that. And so when somebody gets better, when our staff level up, that's worth celebrating, because now we have an even better chance of being more effective to get our jobs done to support our young people. So kind of to wrap it all up and put a bow on it, with the four pieces of onboarding for me, starts with posting, what you should post, where you should reach, identifying the right candidates, what's important to your organization, what do they need to have to be successful, what are your non-negotiables, and how do they potentially create some inaccessibility, and how do you need to look into that. Your interview process, think about the structure, the medium, and the capacity, and then the training, having that onboarding checklist, having the staff training, having success plan, observing and coaching. This is what success looks like to me. This is what effective onboarding looks like to me. This is how you prepare people for the world that they're going to step into to make that difference that we need them to make for our young people every day. That's it. I will stop talking. I know it's been a lot of talking for the last half hour or 40 minutes, or I've lost track of time. I've said so many words. So at this point, questions, concerns, thoughts, what do you want to share with the group? Again, I